My father. Not my favorite. He worked out of a basement lab in Harvard doing research for a toothpaste company. Your friend's life, the one hanging in the balance, not going to be saved by a tube of toothpaste.
He worked out of Harvard, but not on toothpaste.
The following is an in-depth story analysis. If you haven't seen Fringe, you may want to before watching this video. Hot off the heels of 3 successful shows, Felicity, Alias, and the still running at the time Lost, J.J. Abrams gave small-screen audiences one final series for the road before making the big leagues and giving moviegoers their first taste of just how competently he can jumpstart a series, as well as just how incompetently he can end them. That series was Fringe. Half spiritual successor to The X-Files, half Crisis on Two Earths thriller, that miraculously ran for 5 seasons on Fox, despite the network's habit of aborting every other sci-fi series they produce in its first trimester. Since series creators J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman, and Robert Orci, I know, I'm shuddering hearing those names too, all went Hollywood in a big way the year after the series debuted, it meant showrunner duties would be passed off to Jeff Pinkner and J.H. Wyman. Abrams handed them his latest mystery box, and after peeking inside, they realized Fringe's secrets were just too much fun to keep as secrets. Let's step into another world, a lot like our own, just stranger. This is Fringe. Fringe follows the adventures of the FBI's newly minted Fringe division, consisting of Special Agent Olivia Dunham, recently released from the madhouse mad scientist Walter Bishop, Walter's son/babysitter Peter, and lab assistant/ also Walt's babysitter, Asteroid Farnsworth, all 4 of whom answer to DHS Special Agent in Charge, Phillip Broyles. The premise of the series is that, not trying to point fingers, someone traveled from our universe to a parallel universe, destabilizing the very fabric of reality. Now that the laws of physics have become more like the suggestions of physics, mad scientists all over the East Coast are leaping at the opportunity to conduct supernatural experiments in whatever fatal field or deadly doctorate they specialized in, and it's up to the Fringe team to stop them.
That's right, sweetheart. I'm the one you're looking for.
You're going to find yourself endeared to the Fringe team pretty quickly. Anna Torv, John Noble, and Joshua Jackson are all great, and the show establishes its main cast effectively with a relatively minor amount of growing pains compared to most freshman series. Walter Bishop is written the most sure-handed from square one, a former MK Ultra researcher who also collaborated on every other corporate and government conspiracy under the sun. Walter is sprung from the booby hatch to handle the science end of the Fringe team's cases. Between his jovial lack of social decorum, penchant for psychedelics, dark and troubled past where working on MK Ultra barely even cracks the top 5 worst things he's done, if you can believe that, and haunting guilt over said past, Walter brings heart, levity, melancholy, and tragedy to the series, all conveyed expertly by John Noble. The character really comes out of the box fully formed.
Nonetheless, affect our behavior, our sex drive.
Hey, speaking of sex drive.
Oh, Peter, don't be such a prude. I'm sure Agent Dunham knows what a penis looks like.
Cautioning the rest of the cast, and by extension the audience, that Walter is capable of more cruelty than his doddering demeanor lets on, is Walter's son Peter Bishop. Since only a family member is legally allowed to check Walter out of the loony bin, Peter's necessity to the team kind of begins and ends with his last name, leaving the writers with an opportunity to explore what role he's going to serve beyond that. Of all the characters in the series, the writers struggle to find their footing with Peter the most. The series will eventually dial in on what value Peter provides to the Fringe team. As Walter's caretaker, he does more than just prevent him from wandering into oncoming traffic. He provides emotional support and stability. He's also got a handful of seedy criminal connections from a lifetime of less than honest living the Fringe team can tap for help when the FBI's resources fail them. However, in the early episodes, it seemed like the writers wanted Peter's potential connections from a lifetime of globetrotting to be absolutely limitless, hyping the character up like he's Indiana Jones meets Saul Goodman meets MacGyver meets the Lord of War. The mob is after him, terrorist cells are after him, and scratch that. All that goes nowhere. And since it never goes anywhere, all that over-the-top backstory does is undercut how bizarre Walter's backstory as a mad scientist is, since Peter largely plays the role of snarky civilian roped into the chaos against his will, occasionally saving the day using his everyman logic. I would have preferred if he came from a more mundane background. Though in fairness, since most of his shady connections in later seasons are the kind of connections a guy from a mundane background could have, as the series goes on, it's easy to find yourself saying, Jesus Christ, I forgot that's Jason Bourne.
IQ at 190, which is 50 points north of genius. Misfit, nomad, hasn't kept a job longer than 2 months. He's been a wildland fireman, cargo pilot, and briefly a college chemistry professor.
Last but certainly not least is Olivia Dunham. Her boyfriend falls victim to the first ever Fringe case, and she later learns he was involved in a whole Fringe conspiracy. Driven by a desire to learn the truth behind her late lover's sinister conspiracy, as well as just being a consummate professional who's going to do her best with the latest promotion or die trying, Olivia has to rapidly adapt to the world of scientific horrors as she runs point on each new shocking occurrence. One of the most endearing, and these days wonderfully refreshing, things about Olivia is that professionalism I mentioned. Olivia is proudly written all business, in a way that less self-assured writers would never have the confidence to stand by. If she's not rolling her eyes and making quips when she sees the latest unspeakable man-made horror that her day job entails, the audience is gonna think she's boring. But Olivia is not boring. She's bold in the face of danger while still subtly hinting that she's aware she's in over her head, but rising to the occasion like a challenge. Her cold professionalism is entertaining in and of itself, of course, and distinguishes her from her co-stars. When Walter unveils a scheme to track a subject with a whole birds are spies experiment, instead of sarcastically saying, I just tracked a guy with hypersensitive magnetic birds. Oh yeah, I guess that's something I do now. She's mildly annoyed, because Walter and Peter could have told her to buy birds over the phone, and she could have got the ball rolling. Anna Torv conveys Olivia's determination and professionalism that borders on being a workaholic so well, in fact, that the only minor missteps with the character in Season 1 are when the writers doubt her and feel the need to have the characters spell Olivia out to us. She can convey it by making a face, guys. Throw in a little background music too if you don't trust our intelligence. No need to go to the trouble of full-on explaining it.
Don't beat yourself up. You know, you're good at that. That's a character flaw.
You can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry.
So the characters are more or less solid from the get-go. The storylines, not so much. Starting with the cases of the week, nothing offered up in Season 1 is really a face melter. Technically, 2 of them do melt people's faces, but I'm talking more metaphorically. Many early episodes boil down to some evil scientist running evil experiments, which inevitably take the form of kidnapping someone so they can either stick needles in them or put electrodes on them, then releasing that person back into society, where they will invariably explode, turn into a monster, or send out some sort of energy wave and take a bunch of bystanders with them. Terrorist bomb vest parallels. You get the picture. Compare the cases of the week in this season to the stronger stuff down the line. When Fringe grasps what other exceptional shows with Case of the Week structures I've covered, Hannibal and Pushing Daisies, handled expertly, presenting a central internal conflict for one of our leads at the top of the hour, which thematically ties to the monster of the week and informs the episode. Walter's regrets over his scientific sins of the past, that were driven by good intentions but led to disastrous consequences, are an absolute goldmine when it comes to using him as a mirror to sympathetic Jekyll and Hyde antagonists further down the line. Which isn't to say Olivia and Peter don't also serve as emotional foils to intriguing and complex foes. In Season 1, a lot of the cases of the week wind up with unmemorable conclusions, because instead of linking the bizarre biology and chemical catastrophes to a core character beat, the Fringe writers attempt to put a bow on each one-off storyline by implying they're somehow connected to the greater mythos of the series, which is like building your house on a foundation of quicksand. Worse than quicksand. It's like building your house on a foundation of gas. Because this started out as a mystery box series. J.J. Abrams' famous turned infamous tactic of retaining audiences via a tantalizing tease of a mystery to be resolved at a later date. More concerned with generating the mystique of the mystery than having a plan for how to resolve it. When season 1 comes to a close, it's abundantly clear that the writers had no idea where all these teases were going, and they were flying by the seat of their pants.
I'm gonna go and talk to him now, but can you describe to me again what you made? What Loeb was stealing?
Why don't you tell her the truth this time? He kind of sugarcoated last time around.
Still, it's fun to see series regulars from shows I've covered on the channel before turn up as episodic baddies in Fringe. Benjamin Zeitland, Mr. Herkeby, and Britta's in this? Diving into the overarching plot of the first season, I'm going to try and explain it, and we'll go as far as we can before it starts to fall apart. Broyles introduces Olivia to The Pattern, the catalog of Fringe events that are all somehow connected. They first suspect giant evil corporation Massive Dynamic, run by Nina Sharp and founded by Walter's former lab partner, the mysteriously absent William Bell. Though Massive Dynamic is often shown to be indirectly involved in each event, the actual perpetrators are a terrorist organization known as ZFT. Except for a few early episodes where it's not ZFT, it's the terrorist organization that Olivia's deceased lover secretly worked for. But the writers realize Fringe is getting too cluttered with terrorist organizations, so they drop that arc like it's hot after hastily revealing her dead boyfriend was actually a good guy in deep cover trying to stop the terrorist plan to turn people into werewolves. Back to ZFT. Busting the show's first main antagonist, David Robert Jones, out of prison with the aid of a teleportation device, one of the first season's standout episodes, David Robert Jones plots to gas Boston unless Olivia can pass a test of telekinetic abilities. Learning Walter and William Bell dosed her with Compound V as a child, Olivia miraculously passes, which pleases Jones as he's expecting some sort of interdimensional war to break out, and is using all these terrorist attacks to train Olivia for the coming battle against her will. Sort of like the villain's plot in Infamous 1. Oh, shit. Spoilers for Infamous 1.
You've created some ridiculous scenario where people's lives rely on me attempting and failing what is obviously an impossible task.
The task is hardly impossible.
Then in the season finale, David Robert Jones completely changes his motivations. Now a former employee of William Bell out for revenge, he learns that William is hiding out in a parallel universe. The race is on to stop Jones before he crosses over and kills Bell, the only man in the world who seems to have any clue what the hell is going on.
Stop Jones, and I will personally arrange a meeting between you and Bell. But if Jones gets to Bell first, I'm afraid all the answers you're searching for die with him.
Finally picking a lane with where to take Jones, a fairly straightforward and clear lane at that, gives the finale a solid sense of direction. Couple that with Fringe as a whole finally picking a lane when it comes to the overarching plot, dropping ZFT and Olivia's dead lover living in her head, in favor of exploring the two universes sending interlopers back and forth, and Fringe is finally done with finding its footing. The writers are ready to knuckle down and explore the gradually escalating Cold War between over here and over there. And as season 2 goes on, the writers smartly ground the wild conspiracies by really making them all about our three leads. All this started because the Peter on our side died as a child. Walter brought Peter's double over to our side to cure the boy of the disease that took his own son, but found himself unable to part with Peter a second time and never bothered returning him from whence he came.
I became convinced that if only I could cross over myself, then I could take from there what I had lost here.
It's a sympathetic yet sinister backstory, and the emotional core of the series in the following 2 seasons, as Walter wrestles with his culpability in both child abduction and unintentional universal destruction, as well as whether he should keep it a secret from both his not actual son and the shadowy government entities he's working for. It's also a clever payoff to the myriad misremembered memories from Peter's childhood throughout season 1. Peter always chalked Walter's incorrect recollections up to his deteriorated mental faculties, but it turns out it's because his childhood was spent in a different universe, with a different Walter.
They're your toys, son, from when you were a little boy.
Those aren't mine.
But I suppose they must be mine.
It's not really one of your top-tier G.I. Joes, but it is the best we had.
Wait.
Huh. It's funny, I always remember the scar being on the other side.
I've never liked custard.
As a boy, you loved it. You've just forgotten.
Those subtle hints of Peter's secret origins are all well and good, but you see the problem here? For every tease of Walter's interdimensional kidnapping that pays off perfectly, there's 2 teases of other plot lines that wind up either retconned or abandoned entirely. There's lots of cappers outright showing Massive Dynamic is behind some of the villainous conspiracies of Season 1, before the finale reveals, never mind. They're just trying to squirrel away William Bell on the other side. Olivia's dead lover makes up a good chunk of the stingers too. She finds his secret lair, he's living in her head, and can see her when she revisits his memories, which shouldn't be possible. He emails her from beyond the grave. And then the show goes, never mind. He was an undercover good guy trying to bust the werewolf conspiracy. The ZFT Bible is revealed to have been penned by Walter. Oh wait, no, it was William Bell. No, never mind, it was Walter, but the ZFT acolytes are missing a few pages that's making them misinterpret his manifesto. And as mentioned earlier, ZFT debut as interdimensional doomsday preppers, before Jones's grand plan is retroactively rewritten to be a personal vendetta.
I would go as far as to say that all the death and destruction that Jones has caused up until this point has been a way of proving something to William.
Not to say that Jones is a bad villain. In fact, the episodes featuring good old DRJ are actually the highlights of Season 1. Despite his nebulous and ever-shifting goals, the character is fun to watch thanks to Jared Harris's mustache twirling, and whether it's luck of the draw or the character putting some pep in the writer's step, his episodes tend to feature the most visually and conceptually interesting fringe horrors of Season 1.
There is no red wire, no blue, only black. Cut any one of them and the device blows.
So that's the first season of Fringe. Fearing production tax credits might be cut, the series moved shooting locations from New York to Vancouver between seasons 1 and 2, and while the showrunners stayed on, most of the writer's room was not brought along across the border. It took a full 20 episodes to find its footing, but Fringe has finally settled on the core character backgrounds that will inform the second and third seasons of the show. Walter instigating the battle between worlds, Olivia's childhood as a lab rat to prepare a universal protector with interdimensional powers, and Peter's singular nature in a multiverse of doubles, making him this pseudo-chosen one key to the universe. Typically, when I suggest a show but mention it doesn't really hit its stride until the second season, I find people suffer through the first season growing pains anyway, out of fear the later years won't make any sense if they don't. Fringe is an odd case. It's a rare show that actually makes more sense if you start with season 2, since you aren't devoting precious brain cells to plot threads that will ultimately be redacted. Summoned to the other universe to finally meet the man, the myth, William Bell, Olivia's ready for answers. But with the dark histories of Walter, Nina, and Bell destined to be uncovered in Season 2, Olivia and Peter are going to get more answers than they bargained for.
I have a unique perspective shaped by having lived in 2 worlds. I know the difference a wrong choice can make, or a right one.
If you thought Better Call Saul kept you waiting after big cliffhangers with its atmosphere-establishing cold opens set to 30s and 40s music that go on for 5 minutes, buddy, you ain't seen nothing yet. The first season of Fringe concluded with Olivia on the other side, ready to have a face-to-face with William Bell in the alternate reality's still-standing World Trade Center. Unfortunately, her return to our side is less than graceful, nearly killing her and erasing her memories of an extremely crucial and revealing encounter she had at the top of a tower. Just like Bran Stark. Olivia gets to work rehabilitating both her memories and her body with the aid of wax-on, wax-off mysterious healer Sam Weiss. And while the audience will finally see her chat with Belle at the conclusion of episode 4, the beginning of Fringe Season 2 is less about the show's grander conspiracies and more about newcomer onboarding. We don't want to overwhelm the Fringe virgins with a William Bell interdimensional lore dump, so kick that can down the road by temporarily wiping Olivia's memories. While we're at it, let's introduce Meghan Markle to tag along with Peter as an audience surrogate guest star who can ask him questions like, what the hell is going on, anytime a new audience member might start to wonder, what the hell's going on. Like I said, if you want to jump into Fringe with Season 2, the series is really quite accommodating, which isn't to say the first episode will leave returning audiences cold. We get our first taste of the part organic, part mechanical shapeshifters sent from the other side to infiltrate our own, as well as an effective ending that reveals series regular Charlie Francis has been killed and replaced by one of the mercury-blooded machines. Big enough stakes to feel the shift in the status quo, though not a death that's going to break too many hearts. Given Charlie's role in Season 1 was mostly to be a sounding board Olivia could bounce ideas off of when Walter and Peter were both indisposed. Honestly, they could have revealed Charlie was in Olivia's head all along. It probably wouldn't have been too hard to sell since he was basically just the ghost Harry to her Dexter. No shade intended to the actor. He's fun in the role, just doesn't really get to have much fun until he starts to play versions of the character from the alternate universe. Olivia finally restores the memory of her conversation with Bell, who admits to his involvement in dosing her with the psychic-gifting cortexiphan drug as a child, and warns that the shapeshifters are looking for a man on our side to help them open a doorway between universes, just as Walter did. In lieu of the nebulous teases of conspiracies with grand designs from last year, Season 2's teases all come together in a slick way. The shapeshifters track down their man, Newton, who abducts Walter and steals the secret of interdimensional travel from his noggin, and then Newton uses the knowledge to bring the shapeshifter's master over, Walter, or rather, his double, nicknamed Walternate. The Walter over here was willing to abduct Peter to save him and risk universal destruction to do so. Stands to reason the Walter over there would show just as much determination to bring him back. So all the shape-shifting, thought-stealing, neurotoxins, quantum-entangled typewriters, and interdimensional building displacement throughout Season 2 was motivated by a father's love for his son. Also, we could say, I'm your real dad. Why don't you come home with me? Well, not all for that reunion. As Peter will come to learn later, Walter's got a job for him on the other side, and the fate of both universes hangs in the balance.
The object would only respond to a subset of people, and a narrow subset of that. A subset of one.
The gradual build-up episodes to Walternate's bridge between worlds are peppered throughout Season 2. Though I will admit, peppered lightly, given the ratio of Newton episodes compared to the Case of the Week episodes. On top of that, there's also the inevitability of Peter's discovery of his origins, which occasionally informs Walter's emotional ties to the Cases of the Week, but is largely on the back burner until episode 15. So, while the Cases of the Week in Season 2 are a marked improvement over Season 1, now that Fringe has a sense of direction in Walter and Peter's relationship and the slowly creaking open doorway to the other side, it can leave some Cases of the Week feeling like filler, while Fringe takes its sweet time getting to the juicy two worlds colliding material set up in last season's finale. I found myself a tad impatient waiting for the A material to kick off. To use a phrase more colorful than it's time for Fringe to get to the fireworks factory, it's time for Fringe to stop kissing and start fucking. But before jumping into the marvelous string of episodes that conclude Season 2, I'll break down the little details that elevate Season 2's Case of the Week episodes over what came before. Where ZFT, the pattern, and massive dynamic sort of served as band-aid solutions for both villain motivations and ending revelations, the cases of Season 2 frequently are meant to have no connection to the greater mythos of the series. As a consequence, the writers have to conjure up motivations behind each Fringe event. Whether they're bratty, animalistic, sinister, or sympathetic, they're all more compelling than, ooh, doing this will give us the next magic number we need to follow the ZFT manual. Trust the plan. Even shapeshifter Charlie winds up oddly sympathetic, despite being a half-mechanical being, when we learn his kind aren't designed for such long-running assignments, and we get to watch his desperate attempts to stay in deep cover as his disguise falls apart at the seams. There's also a handful of episodes where Walter or Peter are abducted and put in imminent peril, rather than using their dire circumstances to execute a conventional episode where the rest of the cast plots to rescue them. Fringe transforms these into focus episodes for the imperiled character. They're change of pace episodes exploring how they navigate their high-stakes captivities, as opposed to standard episodes using them as damsels in distress, or, I guess, dashing young gentlemen in distress.
I know why you built it. The door. I know what you lost. Now, are you going to pretend that you're willing to lose him again?
Don't let my praise fool you, though. We're still in good, not great territory here, and until we get to episode 15, Jacksonville, when Fringe starts swinging for the fences and goes on a home run derby, nothing in the first 2/3 of season 2 really stands out for me. But then we get to Jacksonville, where Olivia finally truly taps into her Cortexiphan powers, which allows her to deduce objects crossing over from the other side, saving the day by evacuating a building about to warp out of our reality. This gift tips her off to another interloper in our midst, though one oblivious to his origins, Peter.
Olivia, please don't tell him.
The following episode, Peter, is a series highlight. You'll be hard-pressed to find a top 10 Fringe episodes list that doesn't include it, and usually it's going to run away with the gold medal. Peter, the episode, not the person, flashes back to 1985 and retells the events that led up to Walter abducting Peter from over there after the death of Peter from over here. With Walternate asleep at the switch the moment a cure was discovered, it's up to Walter to cross over and deliver the cure. But Nina Sharp and Walter's lab assistant are uncomfortable with both the potential destruction of the laws of physics and the implications of Walter playing God. But mysteriously absent as always, is William Bell, and Walter takes Bell's no-showing as tacit approval of his jaunt to the other world.
I was in Europe chasing funding. They're too busy to come and stop me from destroying the universe. How many times have you rang him today? Once? 20? How many times has he returned your call?
Despite Bell's apparent shared desire to see Walter cross over, Walter does take the time to chastise the ladies who've come to stop his universe-hopping fun for buying into the philanthropic, charismatic image Bell has built up. More than just a confrontation about should he or should he not open a portal, it's also a heated moment to explore the competitive and envious dynamic between Walter and Bell. Given we'll also learn this season that Bell performed brain surgery on Walter while he was in the asylum, causing his lack of mental clarity, and the season finale involves the two reunited and verbally coming to blows, it's an excellent setup.
Why simply take a peek into the other universe, Walter, when you can go there? So till now, he couldn't make me find a way to try to get there, until I had to find a way.
No, I don't believe that.
No, you wouldn't. Because you don't understand him.
In a final physical altercation to prevent Walter from crossing over, the cure is shattered, so Walter has to bring Peter to our side to administer a dose. When his wife sees Peter alive and well in the flesh again, Walter realizes he'll never be able to bring himself to force her to say goodbye to the boy again. A choice made with his wife's best interests at heart in the moment, though her guilt and grief over the truth behind Peter would later lead her to take her own life. For an episode that's like 90% Walter in his house or his lab, talking to people and messing with 80s-era sci-fi machines the props department threw together, it's a triumph on the writer's part that the episode is engaging instead of being dry or, worse, silly. And, fun fact, this was also the most expensive Fringe episode ever made. John Noble sent the producers his massive chiropractor bill after he did his back in carrying the whole thing.
Yes! You did it! By God, you did it!
After the character-rich, lore-rich barn burner that is Peter, the follow-up episode can't help but be a bit of a come-down. Olivia squares off against a fellow Cortexiphan lab rat who was less lucky with the superpowered lottery, after giving Walter an ultimatum that if he doesn't tell Peter the truth about where he comes from, she will. But after that, Fringe really hits its stride, riding the wave of excitement and character complexity generated by our window into 1985 and delivering a slew of experimental, thoughtful episodes. White Tulip is another highlight, Fringe's first foray into time travel, but starts as a Groundhog Day-style case of the week as the culprit grows better and better at evading the Fringe team with each iteration, culminates not on a shootout or car chase, but a 7-minute conversation between Walter and a man who was verging on replicating the grief-induced mistakes Walter made all those years ago. It's a captivating conversation, and the resolution of the episode where it sort of erases its own existence, with only a cosmic sign from a heart-to-heart loss to time as proof it occurred, is an affecting conclusion.
I'm telling you how to do this, but I'm telling you you cannot do it.
I must do it.
You'll never be able to live with the consequences.
I told you no one will die.
That's not the consequences I'm talking about.
The Man from the Other Side is another event episode, with the shapeshifters back on the board as Walternate's plan to cross over comes to fruition. When Peter miraculously survives a collision with otherworldly interference that leaves those around him disintegrated, he deduces the truth behind his kidnapping before Walter is able to work up the courage to break the truth to him on his own terms. With father and son realizing they are not father and son, Olivia has failed Belle's Trade Center request to keep Peter on our side, in more ways than one, and the young Mr. Bishop skips town.
It's why I can't remember my childhood.
You were dying, Peter.
It's why my mother committed suicide. Isn't it? She knew. Didn't she?
Son,
I am not your son.
Brown Betty is a personal favorite, despite being far and away the lowest rated episode on IMDb, which breaks my heart. A bedtime story told by a high-as-a-kite Walter to Olivia's niece in the aftermath of Peter's departure. While it initially reads as a cheesy, lighthearted catch-your-breath episode hot off the heels of a major game-changer, the emotional climax of the episode where Walter casts himself as the twist villain of his own story is a neat insight into the character. It's a relatable pity party I think we've all had in our lives. I'm the villain of my own story. And Olivia's niece proposes a cute, come-back-to-earth alternate ending with a less cynical outcome for Walter's evil self-insert. I will say, the corpses singing Candyman was a nice touch, as was Walter's reprise at the end, but the rest of the musical standards shoehorned in were pretty superfluous. I learned this lesson long ago. If you're going to make a musical television episode or series,
write some original songs!
Northwest Passage is a Peter solo episode, though admittedly the writers don't take full advantage of the opportunity. Peter in a small town having to deduce, or hell, just survive a Fringe case on his lonesome sounds like solid stuff, but the episode establishes early on that despite skipping town, he's still got a lifeline to Broyles, somewhat deflating the tension. They also could have taken the opportunity to throw something truly diabolical Peter's way, now that he's lacking his usual resources, but at the end of the day, he is up against just a creep who abducts and murders women. After solving the case, he finally comes face to face with his papa, and the two return to the other side. The same time as Peter absconds from our reality, Walter discovers an ominous premonition that Walternate's plans for Peter may have disastrous consequences for our side. When Walter crossed over, reality was destabilized. On our side, it takes the form of mad scientists goofing around with deadly experiments in the soft spots. But on the other side, it's the end of days. At any moment, a soft spot can go too soft, and to plug the impending hole in the fabric of the universe, the area is sealed by the other side's government in a quick-setting gaseous amber, along with any unlucky souls trapped inside. Peter gets acclimated to the odd and amusing pop culture differences on the other side, and gets to work helping Walternate repair a machine that only responds to Peter's biology. While Walternate presents it to Peter as a reality repair kit, it is, in actuality, a doomsday device. As soon as they can get it working, it will seal the holes on their side by simply erasing our side.
Maybe we'd have dinner and just fuck the world and that'll be our whole thing.
Listen, a magic device that only works when Peter is controlling it, that can destroy universes, is not exactly a plot element that's going to hold up to intense scrutiny, and it only gets more complicated when time travel gets involved in the following season. I went to the Fringe wiki hoping maybe it was the kind of thing that would make sense once you saw it all typed out front to back, but the word somehow was in the first paragraph, so no, didn't really answer my questions. Unfortunately, you kind of just have to accept the existence of the Doomsday Machine and roll with the punches, which isn't too tall an order when everything else going on in the Season 2 finale is so outstanding.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
Teaming up with a few Cortexiphan alumni, by their powers combined, Olivia is able to warp herself, the Cortexiphan kids, and Walter to the other side for a Peter rescue mission. Although the Cortexiphan kids are an absolute redshirt brigade who don't get much time to do New York sightseeing before biting the dust.
I told you there would be invaders coming over from the other side, but I didn't tell you they would be us.
No, you did not.
There are doubles. Alternate versions of ourselves, but don't be deceived, Olivia. They're monsters in our skin.
Olivia poses as her ruthless red-headed double to deduce Peter's location and unveil Walternate's ulterior motives. Crushed to learn that yet another Walter has been hiding a terrible secret from him, Peter laments that he doesn't belong in his homeworld, but doesn't really belong in our world either. Olivia comforts the crestfallen Peter, saying, "I know where you belong. You belong in this Fringe agent." Meanwhile, Walter and William Bell reunite to build a device to get the team back home. Since the Kurtzman kids had to go and die on us, watching the two old friends turned rivals share the screen for the first time is amusing.
Hello, William.
Walter?
I see you've aged.
It appears I'm not the only one.
What begins as endearing squabbling soon turns heavy, as Walter takes William to task for both aiding Walternate in the invention of the shapeshifters as a means of maintaining his cover, and tinkering with Walter's thinker when he was in the mental institution. With the team reunited, William sacrifices himself to get them back to our side, but not before revealing that he only performed surgery on Walter's brain at Walter's request. Walter was growing concerned at how unethical, uninhibited, and capable he was becoming, a terrifying premonition of Walternate's villainous potential. His brain is still fully intact, and about to be on the receiving end of his dastardly scientific schemes is Olivia. Our Olivia. As the Season 2 finale came to a close, Walternate and Fauxlivia hatched a plan to pull the old switcheroo, which was cleverly foreshadowed throughout the finale. A number of characters come up to Peter to discuss what things are like on the other side, most notably his still-living other mother. But rewatching the episode, you realize Olivia wasn't asking out of existential curiosity. She was doing opposition research.
What's she like?
Who?
Me. You have a sister too? And a niece. Ella. She's 7. Ella.
So that's Season 2 of Fringe. Whereas the first season concluded by finally establishing a status quo, the second season wraps up with a dynamite shakeup to the status quo, one that the following season will capitalize on beautifully. 2 Olivias behind enemy lines, with allegiances to opposite worlds, all while Walternate puts into motion a plan of his own.
Nature doesn't recognize good and evil, Phillip. Nature only recognizes balance and imbalance. I intend to restore balance to our world.
Walternate may have got his hands on an intruder from our side, but he's not intending to just lock her up and throw away the key. A super agent with a photographic memory, telekinetic powers, and the ability to travel between dimensions isn't a toy you leave in the box and never play with. So Walternate gets to work brainwashing Olivia into believing she's her double. Her Kurtzman powers will be easier to tap into if she's using them to aid our side of her own volition. The Season 3 premiere takes place entirely on the other side. As Zeppelin's overhead, Olivia escapes custody and goes on a trans-dimensional border run, racing against the ticking clock of Walternate's brainwashing therapy taking hold of her mind. Ultimately unsuccessful in her flight from the Walternate-run Department of Defense, Olivia succumbs to the indoctrination and takes her double's place, establishing Fringe's daring new status quo. Olivia in the other universe, working with the more militarized, less clandestine other Fringe team to solve their cases, all while participating in Walternate's after-hours extracurricular activities, helping him reverse engineer Kurtzman. Unbeknownst to Walternate, her new identity didn't completely take, and she's haunted by visions of Peter pointing out the subtle things that are off about her new world. As it becomes increasingly obvious that she's living a lie, Olivia goes along to get along, secretly scheming to make the jump back and reclaim her proper life.
Please, I don't belong here!
Back on Earth Prime, love is in the air for Fauxlivia and Peter, with the change in their relationship dynamic concealing Olivia's apparently more carefree attitude. But behind the scenes of each case, Fauxlivia is a spanner in the works, aiding and abetting the shapeshifters and making sure none of the cases come to tidy conclusions. One of the more interesting things about Olivia's infiltration is her relationship with the biomechanical shapeshifters in Deep Cover. They're starting to verge on passing the Voight Comp test, feeling remorse and sympathy in regards to their mission and marks. But Fauxlivia, the only human operative, is utterly callous, single-mindedly bent on winning the War of the Worlds. On orders from Walternate, the undercover redhead is looking for spare Doomsday Machine parts on our side that they couldn't manage to track down on their side. Track down, you ask? Yes. Here's where things get a little weird. So, Fringe often has technobabble, explaining the science behind the cases where you sort of nod your head and go, okay, so magic. But in the grand scheme of sci-fi wackiness, it's always been relatively grounded. So when Fringe explains that the Doomsday Machine was created by the first people, an ancient, hyper-advanced civilization that preceded the dinosaurs and mysteriously vanished, it's probably going to raise a few eyebrows. Fringe has never done, crazy shit like this before. They did aliens once, but it was an intangible radiation alien, not a guy in a rubber suit alien. And then there's the bald observers who travel through time to witness historic events, but they've always been on the fringes of Fringe's story, and that's about it. To quell any fears of Fringe going off the deep end, and save you the energy of trying to deduce the First People's calendar, intentions, and disappearance, I'm just going to give it away right now. The First People is Walter. He made the Doomsday Machine, sent it back through time for the Fringe team to find and fix the problems of the universe, and designed it so only Peter would be able to use it to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Which begs several questions. What's with all the fake First People lore? Why is there another Doomsday Machine in the other universe? If Walternate made the other one, why did he also make it so only Peter could use it when he knew he wouldn't have access to Peter? Why would Walternate's machine have also been sent through time and buried if the wormhole only appeared after his world is destroyed?
So now I've gone cross-eyed.
We're accepting the existence of the Doomsday Machines and moving on. First People fuckery aside, the hot streak that concluded Season 2 bleeds over into the first half of Season 3, and if anything, it's only getting hotter. This evens on our side, odds on their side, back and forth episode structure works marvelously, thriving on not just the strength of the greater narrative, but also because these cases of the week are some of the best the series has ever produced. For the most part, they're tackling themes such as loss of identity or living a double life, all fitting foils to Olivia, without ever being obnoxiously obvious. Despite being set in another universe and consisting of what is essentially an entirely new cast, save Olivia, the Over There episodes are really where you're gonna get your money's worth. I particularly love the Flowers for Algernon killer who becomes so intelligent he can engineer people's murders with seemingly innocuous objects in ways that imply accidental death. If you ever need to kill someone, that's the way I'd recommend.
We see impossible every day.
You see improbable. You're asking me if it is possible for a person to use a ballpoint pen to set off a chain of events that culminates in someone getting killed by a bus twice?
The whole episode starts building up to Olivia being inevitably crushed by a pallet of bricks, and the method in which she survives, neglecting an alt-world safety protocol that should be muscle memory that the man couldn't predict because, how could he predict she's from another universe? It's just too good. A brilliant way out of an impossible death trap.
Well, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Not to say the episodes over here are bad or anything, just that the high-stakes narratives and alternate timeline novelties mean our peeks into the other world are gonna outshine regular old Earth that is. I do also have a bit of a complaint with the character focus when it came to the dynamics on our side. The writers are so concerned with secret agent Fauxlivia that they forgo another potential interpersonal conflict, foreshadowed the previous season but never really explored. The Season 2 finale was do or die. Bring Peter back before the world ends, but just because he's back doesn't mean he's forgotten what Walter's done.
I'm trying to see this your way, Walter. I can't.
There was potential to do a lot with Peter and Walter repairing their relationship post-revelation, now that the urgency of escaping Walternate's clutches has subsided. Instead, Peter and Walter are immediately back to their old playful father and son caretaker dynamic when Season 3 kicks off, which feels like a missed opportunity. It sorta makes sense. Peter thinks the will they won't they with Olivia is finally happening for him. Having Fauxlivia stick her assive dynamic in your face every night is gonna make any man forget about his daddy issues.
She tricked my son with her carnal manipulations and he fell right into her agenda.
Vagenda?
The spiritual mid-season finale of Season 3 comes with Entrada. Olivia over there has outlived her usefulness and is due to be sent home, short a few organs they'll be keeping for testing purposes that she kind of needs to live. Over here, Fauxlivia has blown her cover and gone on the run. It's a thrill ride to watch two different Olivias go on the run while two different Fringe teams hunt them down. But the real heart of the episode comes from, surprisingly, Broyles. Alt Broyles, actually, who comes to save the day when he learns Walternate intends to vivisect Olivia. He owes her one for her decision the previous episode to save his son from the Candyman killer, jeopardizing her original escape attempt to stay behind and save a child in a world that's not even hers. But he's also coming to see that the gradual collapse of their universe is the result of an accident, not malice. There's some impactful, quiet moments as Broyles 2 laments being put in a position where he has to play God with the lives of others, made all the more impactful as we've grown to care for him and the team under his command in these short few Red Universe episodes. The ending, where he makes a final stand and winds up the unlucky sucker cosmically displaced by Fauxlivia's warp back, eviscerating his body in the process and traumatizing his double with the sight of his own mutilated corpse, is wild.
Broyles, stop. I don't think you want to see this.
Olivia may have made it safely back to our side, but getting back into the routine of day-to-day is no easy task. Despite her initial attempts to just walk that shit off, the gross invasion of privacy from her doppelganger continues to leave her uncomfortable in her own skin, only exacerbated when she learns the man she was interested in sparking a romantic relationship with spent her whole unwanted summer abroad program hooking up with her imposter.
Now she's everywhere. She's in my house, my job, my bed, and I don't want to wear my clothes anymore, and I don't want to live in my apartment, and I don't want to be with you.
Olivia's frustration is warranted. Hey, maybe if Peter wasn't thinking with his dick, he would have caught on that Olivia was missing and could have done something to save her, instead of leaving it up to her to save herself. The way they try to return to professionalism, but uncomfortable outbursts and confrontations still bubble up in the heat of the moment, is also pretty natural, although the tension carries on a little longer than I feel is fair. I mean, Olivia can distrust how genuine Peter's feelings are for her, since he didn't notice she was replaced with an imposter. That's understandable, but one could argue, Peter got raped. You should probably cut the guy a little slack. Getting back into the routine is tough for Olivia, but it's also kinda tough for the audience, I'm afraid. Hot off the heels of the exceptional arc of two Olivias seeing how the other half lives, returning to normalcy takes quite a bit of wind out of the series' sails, and there isn't a ton of momentum aside from who's gonna turn on the machine, eventually. To counteract this, after a string of cases of the week, Fringe decides to get weird, with mixed results. Flashing back to the 80s again, the show offers up a pseudo-sequel to the episode Peter from the second season. 6 months after abducting his son from the other side, Walter has rolled out the Cortexiphan trials in an effort to find a safe way to send his son back. There are some cool moments, but it's a mixed bag. Whereas Peter could count on the ever-reliable John Noble to sell even its more on-the-nose moments, now he's splitting his time in 86 with a couple child actors. It's always a gamble when you reveal characters actually met in the past and didn't remember it. You roll the dice, and sometimes you come up snake eyes. I mean, I'm a sucker for the saccharine conclusion to last year's Brown Betty, but Peter and Olivia's little Moonrise Kingdom moment, even for me, that's corny. But then you have young Olivia triggering her powers and not realizing it, accidentally spilling the beans about the alternate universe to the despondent Walternate who just lost his son. Now that was awesome.
Elizabeth, it's me. I know where our son is. I know where Peter was taken.
In the present, Walternate's plans to be rid of that alternate universe are nearing their completion. Realizing Fauxlivia returned knocked up with his grandchild, he intends to use the child's DNA to fuel his machine in Peter's absence, and accelerates Fauxlivia's pregnancy without her consent or knowledge of his involvement. It's another weird one. The writers kind of try to structure the whole thing as like a let's rescue Olivia whodunit mystery, but it's so abundantly obvious Walternate is the one who done it to Miss Dunham, and that she's not in any real danger and he's sending the Fringe team on a wild goose chase, that it's more of a setup episode than any sort of exciting watch in its own right. Back in our reality, the real zaniness is unfolding. Utilizing technology known as soul magnets, the deceased William Bell get-outs Olivia.
Her awareness is at a state of rest, but I assure you she is totally safe. This is all exactly as I planned it.
Body swapping episodes are usually layups for me, because who doesn't love watching actors ham it up and act like their co-stars? However, I remembered Bellivia being played for more comedy than she is. Walter just kind of accepts that William is back. William doesn't acknowledge how uncomfortable this must be for Peter, and Peter can't even bring himself to chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. He's just like, get out of my girlfriend. Fringe plays Bellivia relatively straight, which I guess is admirable, but I will add, it still is silly. Kudos to Anna Torv for being game and serving as a means to bring back William Bell, despite Leonard Nimoy being supposedly retired at this point. But my god, it's still so silly. So at the end of the day, I just wish they owned it.
Stranger things have happened.
No, they haven't. Don't listen to him. Her. Sorry. Go on.
To retrieve Olivia's psyche, the Fringe team has to incept her, which means expanding their collective consciousness, which means, you guessed it.
You touched the tray with the sugar cubes?
Sure. Why?
Have you ever taken LSD?
Bell's backup plan to upload his consciousness into a computer goes kaput, and Olivia returns to her normal self, with the 3-episode Bellivia arc having 0 real consequences and ultimately just feeling like a giant side quest / fever dream. But hey, it had its moments. Things may have been a bit shaky in the second half, but the finale of Season 3 brings us home for a solid landing. Accelerated Grandpa of the Year, Walternate, turns on his machine, kicking off Doomsday. But thanks to David Robert Jones's prescient Doomsday prepping, Olivia is able to shut it off with her mind. Turnabout being fair play and all that, Peter steps into the machine on our side and obliterates the other side. Jumping 15 years into the future, we see that our world is now falling apart at the seams just as the other side was. It turns out we were inextricably linked. You blow up the other world, you're just screwing yourself.
It was the day we sealed our fate. For all intents and purposes, that was the day we died.
Olivia and Peter are married, Walter is in prison for ultimately being responsible for all of this, and Walternate crossed over to our side just before the end to wave the white flag once he realized he'd lost fair and square, only for his world to get annihilated while he was here to sign his peace treaty. Now bent on revenge, Walternate plans to accelerate the decay of the universe to get back at everyone, and plans to emotionally torture his son to get back at him specifically. Walternate made a great sympathetic villain, but he makes a fun outright evil villain too. He even does the whole "I've been a hologram the whole time" bit to an unsuspecting Peter right before shooting his wife. Classic villain gag.
I don't want to have to use these. But you're going to come with me now, Father.
You know, Peter, if I was really there, I might not be able to resist killing you.
At his wife's funeral, Peter's like, ugh, this future sucks. Fortunately, Walter's got a plan to set right what once went wrong. He realizes he's the first people, there's a time anomaly at the Central Park wormhole, they send the machine back, but program in this prophetic vision so Peter can see what a shit show it will be if he uses the machine to destroy the other side. Back in the present, Peter uses the machine to create a permanent bridge between the worlds, stabilizing reality, but putting Walternate, who hates Walter, and Olivia, who hates Fauxlivia, in a room together. War is over, kids. Time for everyone to start getting along. They also imply it did a bunch of damage to both worlds in the process, but it never comes up. The Day We Died is a strong finale, with a grim weight to the proceedings, creative one-off world building for the new apocalyptic time period, and a tidy conclusion to wrap up the War Between Universes storyline. That being said, I am not the biggest fan of the ending. His bridge complete, Peter starts to explain the new dynamic to the group, but before he can finish, he phases out of reality. Everybody moves on like he never existed, and outside, a couple observers confirm, yes, by using the device, Peter retroactively never existed. The Peter being erased from existence thing, and spoilers, he gets better, makes up the bulk of the 4th season's main storyline. Some things they do with it really, really work. Some things, not so much. But when it comes to, like, an ending, a payoff to Season 3, Peter turning into a puff of hot air from the lips of a ghost in the shadow of a unicorn's dream leaves me wanting. I wasn't really thinking what's going to happen next, because you just know he'll be back, and you can't really get invested in the emotional stakes of his disappearance because all the characters forgot he exists. they don't have any emotions about the situation. They could not care less. Not to go all armchair screenwriter on the last 2 minutes of the finale, but why is the big sacrifice that Peter has to stop existing? The 2 recurring Peter-centric character beats throughout Season 3 were that Walter would have to learn to let Peter go, and Olivia kept picking up hints that Peter had genuine feelings for her double, even after Fauxlivia's traitorous identity was revealed. I thought the cost to repair the universes would be, you want stability in the universe, Peter has to go back. And stay back. Olivia has to contend with Peter potentially making moon eyes at her double again. Peter has to make peace with the evil counterparts of his friends and family, who nearly ended the world. And Walter has to say goodbye. And then in episode 6 of the next season, I don't know, it's the world of Fringe. Some idiot's experiment is bound to fail miserably and bring him back to our side by accident. Again, armchair screenwriter, but that's just my 2 cents. 2 cents that probably have like William Henry Harrison on them, because my idea only happened in another universe. Instead, what we got was a new, rewritten timeline. It may have been hard to say goodbye to his wife in the bad future he witnessed in The Day We Died, but Peter is slowly going to realize in Season 4, in a way, he's already said goodbye to everyone.
I've been haunted for weeks with visions of a strange man, and now the stranger is here in the flesh, in our midst, and no one will let me examine him or even see him. I'm kept in the dark, knowing nothing.
Welcome to Season 4. It's now a very Peterless universe out there, with the timeline rewritten so that after bringing Walternate's son back from the other side, no observers showed up to fish Walter and Peter out of the ice they fell through, and Peter drowned. The premiere is pretty damn weak. Lots of as you know lines to hastily get audiences sped up to the new status quo, and the plot is just a rehash of Season 2's premiere. A new brand of shapeshifter is on the market, and the nebbish double of the alternate universe's hotshot Fringe captain Lincoln Lee serves as the newcomer audience surrogate. After the premiere, though, Fringe Season 4 quickly finds its footing. Of course, it's only a matter of time before Fringe magic brings Peter into this reality, and while initially skeptical of this mysterious man who inexplicably knows high-level government secrets, Broyles and co. eventually warm up to his assistance, since he has foreknowledge of cases that have yet to occur in this altered timeline, especially valuable when it's revealed that David Robert Jones is still kicking, and back on his terror campaigns.
Take me to your leader.
I'm back, baby. The bitch is back.
Since Peter handed Lane his resignation papers once before, he's all too confident he'll win round 2. Got a chuckle out of me when the Fringe team was like, you faced off against him in another world. What's he up to, man? What's he doing? What are his motivations? And Peter goes, yeah, about that. His motivations were kind of all over the place. Fringe Season 4 has a reputation for being the red-headed stepchild season, thanks to its daring status quo shakeup that rubbed longtime fans the wrong way, which is ironic, given that of the 5 seasons, when all is said and done, Season 4 is the only one that canonically happened and isn't erased by time travel. Even showrunner J.H. Wyman would confess in 2012 that, yeah, he can see why people weren't on board with the whole Peter being erased from existence thing. So, I'll admit, rewatching Season 4 for this video, I was pleasantly surprised. There are certainly issues with the timeline-altering shenanigans, which we'll get to, but the episode-to-episode quality lives up to Season 2 and 3 preceding it. One Night in October is a creative use of the newly forged alliance between worlds, profiling a serial killer with the aid of his non-felonious double on the other side. Those We've Left Behind is Peter's own white tulip, forcing him to come to terms with his recent loss of loved ones, all with Slipmaker Channel favorite Stephen Root as the week's guest star.
You say that you shouldn't change fate, but you don't know. You don't know what's waiting for you. How terrible it is. Sweetheart, I'll never give up, Kate. Never. I'll build it again. I can do it again.
Making Angels is a creative use of the observer concept, when one of their prognosticators falls into human hands, and he uses it to euthanize people destined for miserable lives in a twisted form of mercy. And of course, Welcome to Westfield is a series highlight. The whole Brigadoon, inescapable town, survive the night while the populace goes nuts thriller, with some of Fringe's most unsettling visuals to boot. There's also a lot of fun to be had with the Elseworlds novelty of the altered timeline. There's the inversion of Walter's first season dynamic with Peter, where once it was Walter desperate for his son's affection while Peter dismissed him, now Peter's looking to recapture the fire-forged friendship he built with his father throughout the series, while Walter keeps his son at arm's length, afraid of repeating past mistakes if he gets too invested in a double of his son again.
The subject can lower the arms.
You can call me Peter.
Subject does not have an elevated radiation level.
Any excuse to bring Jared Harris back is always welcome. And the way Peter is able to spoil his evil mastermind fun, since he handily kicked his ass once before and doesn't take him seriously at first, is pretty amusing. Watching the two worlds collaborate through gritted teeth is a fresh spin on a familiar concept. The idea that Peter also recognizes he's in an Elseworld scenario, doesn't want to get involved in the continued spats between our side and their side, and is willing to play both sides in a bid to get home, opens some exciting narrative doors. But there's the rub. Peter thinks this is an Elseworld scenario, and that he's in different new universes, but we, the audience, know from square one, this is the same universe we've always been in. The timeline was rewritten. And that's where the problems crop up. Part of television is getting to know and like all the characters. And aside from Peter, everyone we've come to know over the last 3 seasons is gone, and replaced by variations of themselves. Which is fun as a novelty, but when you realize we're never going back, it's kind of sad. Especially since the show rather explicitly lays out that some of the series' biggest emotional moments never occurred. Obviously, every heart-to-heart or confrontation with Peter, forget about it. Olivia never passed, or even attempted, Jones's sadistic psychic games.
What do you even need Walter's device for when you can just cross back and forth anytime by yourself?
And I can what?
Walter never learned the truth of his brain surgery from Belle and reconciled their relationship. Walter never became the owner of Massive Dynamic, but since the writers never did anything with that plot, you could be forgiven for forgetting it ever happened in the first place. Broyles never died a hero saving Olivia, traumatizing his double in the process, instead living long enough to become the villain, as a blackmailed ally of Jones. And White Tulip never happened. Well, I guess it technically never happened even in its own episode, but it never happened, and Walter never received that sign of forgiveness. It's heartbreaking to find Peter forgotten by the world, but rather than capitalize on the heartbreak and explore the emotions of being stuck in an altered timeline, the writers seem well aware that this daring direction is going to piss off fans, and instead attempt to minimize the impact to avoid that knee-jerk worst season ever complaint. Peter spends the whole season looking for a way home, which is more frustrating than exciting since we know he's already there and the quest is futile. And then in episode 15, when he learns the truth, he couldn't care less about the revelation because Olivia's memories of the old timeline have been restored, his friendship with Walter is reinstated, and his life is already back to the status quo. Wait, how did Olivia's memories of the old timeline come back, you ask?
There is no scientific explanation. I believe you call it love.
Love? Who's been screwing with this thing?
So, here's the weirdest bit of season 4. Olivia starts to lose her memories of the existing timeline, and they're getting replaced by the memories of the original Peter timeline, obviously intended as a means to appease longtime fans. See? Our Olivia is back. This has all kinds of weird implications. Despite the memory swap coming at the cost of sacrificing memories of meaningful relationships in this timeline, Olivia's all for it. She comes across like a smitten teenager in a coming-of-age film, recklessly making major decisions for the boy she's crazy about. Meanwhile, it's up to Peter and Walter to be actual adults about the situation and go, no, Peter, you need to leave before you overwrite Olivia's memories, because that's just creepy and weird. But at the end of the day, Olivia consents and Peter consents, so the contrived memory rewrite happens, and Olivia becomes our Olivia. Then she shows up to work the next morning and is shocked to find the FBI doesn't want to employ her anymore. As if erasing all your memories and replacing them with fake ones is a lifestyle choice, and not the kind of thing that would ridiculously impact your job performance, and, given her position, possibly lead to the destruction of the world.
40% of all the information you provided about your life is incorrect. Which, as far as the 10th floor is concerned, means you are not the agent they licensed.
It was a weird and forced way to soften the blow of the altered timeline for audiences who were invested in Olivia and didn't want to see her effectively become a different person. But I'm of the mindset that if you're going to do the bit, commit to the bit. Compare Fringe to a series that tackled a very similar season arc, Eureka. Huge spoilers for the series Eureka. Eureka set themselves up much better for success, also kicking off their season 4 with an altered timeline, but instead of only one main cast member coming along for the ride, every main cast member but one came along for the ride. Then, the writers could change the world around them as radically as they wanted. But the shared experiences and identities of the group of characters remained. Nothing had to be walked back.
We can't tell anyone. What happened has to stay with the 6 of us. Agreed? Welcome to the new world.
But I'll be seeing you.
Apologies if I'm starting to sound down on this season. Like I said before, the Case of the Week quality is on par with the glory days of seasons 2 and 3. I wouldn't be doing my job here though if I didn't go in depth on why this season rubbed many the wrong way, being hindered at times by its season narrative where preceding seasons were elevated by theirs.
Clearly I'm in the wrong place, and all the people that I know and love are somewhere else. I just gotta figure out how to get home.
The big reveal in the 2-part finale is that, despite puppeteering the next-gen shapeshifters and the manipulated Kurtzman subjects, David Robert Jones has a puppet master of his own. William Bell is the mastermind of all this horror, plotting to collapse the two universes in on each other to achieve the ultimate legacy, creating a new universe and literally playing God. Use all my knowledge and resources to create a hyper-advanced utopia? Ah, fuck that. I want to spend my golden years in a world of monsters. Having a hidden villain hijack the plot in the 11th hour, despite the other villain being the face of evil for the majority of your story, can work. I find making it work generally depends on two things: that the greater mastermind introduced has strong charisma and an impressive master plot, and that the underling audiences have come to love to hate as the supposed main villain retains their characterization and gravitas post-reveal. Fringe drops the ball on both of these points. Drops the ball like it's made of osmium. The regular kind, not the floating, physics-breaking kind. Not to diss the late Leonard Nimoy, God rest his soul, but let's be real, Nimoy playing William Bell has always been stunt casting thanks to his well-established sci-fi street cred, and he made a better cryptic mentor of dubious trustworthiness than he does a maniacal mastermind with a god complex. Meanwhile, DRJ joins Twilight Princess's Zant in the category of characters who are utterly emasculated as soon as it comes out they're not the main villain. Through a chess metaphor, Bell cryptically instructs Jones to kill Peter Bishop. Jones attacks Peter with a crowbar, but Olivia is able to use her Kurtzman powers to give Peter an edge in the fistfight, and after mortally wounding Jones, Jones recognizes that Bell wanted him to lose the fight. The chess metaphor was actually referring to him as a sacrifice play.
I was the sacrifice. I was the bishop.
This is one of the worst character assassinations I've seen in fiction. Character assassination metaphorically, I mean. For Jones, the formerly intelligent mad scientist manipulator who was always 2 steps ahead and brought 2 universes' Fringe teams to their knees only 1 episode prior. I don't mean character assassination as in Jones's attempted assassination of the character Peter. That was, well, yeah. I do mean that too. That was also the worst attempt to actually assassinate a character I've ever seen. Go assassinate Peter Bishop. Okay. Can you spare me some more of those spontaneous combustion nanites, Daddy Bell? Or at least a gun? He gave 2 to the other henchmen, including the prototype one that can shoot observers. No, sorry, Jones. This is one of those bring your own equipment sort of jobs. I picture David Robert Jones going to the hardware store, walking past all the axes and knives and chainsaws and everything you'd need to make a pipe bomb. Then he gets to the crowbars and goes, bingo. I'm also genuinely curious, was this really supposed to be Bell sacrificing Jones as part of his plan? Jones's sacrifice accomplishes literally nothing. He doesn't incapacitate Peter for any significant amount of time, or delay the Fringe team's response to Bell's next move in any way. On top of that, despite using the most grug-brain tactic ever, Jones still almost won. Bell must have wanted him to win. Oh, I see. I was meant to be the sacrifice all along. I don't know, bro. Sounds like cope to me.
God made us in his image. If that is so, if we are capable of being gods, then it is our destiny to do so.
The Fringe team confronts Bell on his container ship arc of genetically engineered species, and learning Olivia is the final Cortexiphan battery powering his universal collapse scheme, Walter shoots Olivia in the head. Bell vanishes into the ether now that his dream of a new world is dead, and the excess Cortexiphan in Olivia's system allows her to rapidly regenerate brain tissue and come back from the dead. The world has been saved, but at a great cost. The bridge between universes had to be closed for good, just when everyone was finally starting to get along. That's Season 4 of Fringe, a fun ride that occasionally utilized its bold premise for creative and meaningful what-if scenarios, but with a lot of questionable choices and a pretty questionable finale in the process. From one bold premise to another, as teased in the 19th episode of Season 4, Season 5 intends to shake up the status quo yet again. We're jumping to the year 2036, 21 years after the Observers invaded the timeline and conquered the world at humanity's expense.
You're alive.
Where is she?
All of you.
Where is she?
Why haven't you aged? How did you not age?
We know you bought her.
So here's the deal with the Observers. Far in the future, they've been implanting themselves with tech that inhibits their emotions in exchange for higher brain function, plus a whole bunch of handy other abilities like mind reading, short-range teleportation, and wicked fast reaction times. Also far off into the future, the planet's completely trashed, so they've been exploring the past for a suitable home. 2015 is the earliest, least destroyed Earth they can show up to occupy, without their arrival creating a paradox where the occupation itself erases their own existence in the future, which is the writer's handwave for why the Observers didn't just occupy, like, the Stone Age. I mean, Gna has a pretty sweet club here, but I don't think it's going to be a match for Captain Teleports Behind You Windmark. The fragile timeline stability is also a justification for why this season's villains don't just use time travel to win the day unceremoniously. Late in the season, Windmark runs it up the chain to his superiors. He's like, listen, this Fringe team has been a real thorn in my side. Can I get approval to go back in time and shoot Walter Bishop while he's in the can? And they're like, nah. We put a lot of legwork into getting this bleak future going. We're not going to risk not existing just so you can kill one guy. Windmark is right to be worried about that one guy, though, because Walter Bishop has a plan to overthrow the Observer occupation. After spending 2 decades frozen in amber, the Fringe team is freed and ready to put that plan into action. There's just one problem. In order to prevent the Observers from reading his mind and learning the plan, Walter scrambled his memories of the plan. And after being psychically tortured at the hands of Windmark, the memories are now too scrambled to ever remember. Thanks to some backup videotapes Walter left at the old Fringe lab, the team is able to start acquiring materials necessary for the plan, though with the tapes being out of order, missing, degraded, or simply produced by the eternally scatterbrained Walter, the team still doesn't have any clue what the actual plan is.
Not under any circumstances. Is that raspberry filling?
Despite the radical shakeup to the status quo, the tapes are the mechanism by which Fringe maintains its Adventure of the Week structure. It kind of feels like a video game. The tape sends the team on a fetch quest, there is some new and bizarre hazard at the location that prevents them from getting their hands on that week's MacGuffin, and after they do get their hands on it, if wherever that MacGuffin wasn't already crawling with observers and their human loyalist underlings, you better believe it will be by the episode's climax. And more than feeling like a video game in the generic sense, it also feels like a specific video game, and that specific video game is, unfortunately, Mass Effect 3. Let me explain. Mass Effect 3 saw the galaxy invaded by the unstoppable giant monsters called Reapers. And to stop them, all the races of the galaxy joined forces to build a device called the Crucible. What does the Crucible do? Nobody has any clue. But we're putting all our eggs into that basket, and when we turn it on, we'll just hope it works. Same energy with the television's so-called plan. I get that Fringe has always been a series that attempts to keep viewers hooked with its mysteries, but I did find it difficult to stay invested when tape after tape is just, go collect this object, I'll explain later, with no indication of what the plan's actual endgame is until episode 11. Are we gonna kill all the observers? Are we gonna erase their existence with time travel? Are we gonna go down to Sam Weiss's bowling alley and challenge Captain Windmark to a game of 10 pins that decides the fate of the universe? I share in Peter's mid-season frustration. I'd like to know what the point of these trinkets and doodads are, so I can get more invested in the team's efforts to retrieve them.
Pieces we don't know how to put together. A scroll with physics we can't decipher, a thought unifier that doesn't work, and a box of rocks from a mine.
Despite the vague endgame, there's plenty of action-packed, self-indulgent fun to be had running these little insurgency missions with the gang. They've gone from investigating Fringe events to perpetrating them, and the fan service heaven only gets sweeter when Walter Bishop unveils his sentimental treasure trove of chemical weapons the team has investigated over the years.
So this is every Fringe event?
Documented and preserved to the best of my ability. Oh, look, Olivia, my porcupine man.
It's a gas, pun intended, watching the Fringe team wage guerrilla warfare. Though at times, the weekly adventures are more sizzle than steak. Seasons 2 through 4 had quite a few cases of the week that really dialed in on evocative and affecting emotional parallels with the main characters, with Season 2 usually being Walter-focused thanks to his dark and troubled past, Season 3 usually being Olivia-focused thanks to the whole trading places bit, and Season 4 usually being Peter-focused thanks to him being out of place, out of time. Season 5 has the kernels of some compelling character arcs, but I don't feel the writers get as much mileage as they could out of them. In Season 4's Letters of Transit, the teaser episode that set up Season 5, Walter had the pieces of his brain removed by William Bell restored, with the team anticipating he would need all his wits about him if they were going to stand a chance fighting against the observers. For the rest of the episode, he became the Walternate version of Walter. His personality completely changed.
I think you're just what we've been waiting for. Someone to show people that we don't just have to accept our fate. We can use our will and our imagination to make a better world, a better life.
In that case, a little more focus and a little less pontificating, we might have the job done by now.
Then, when we got to Season 5 proper, he was back to his typical Walter self. I chalked it up to him getting mind-tortured by Windmark early on in the episode. The stress of the invasive brain scrambling brought him back down to the doddering Walter we know and love. But then, later in the season, the topic of him falling back into bad habits and becoming the hubris-driven, Walternate version of himself crops up again. Rather than disappearing into this former persona, all we really get are some quick scenes where Walter says something harsh and blunt, and another character chastises him and goes, "You're starting to sound like the old Walter." But he doesn't feel all that different. They're just kind of telling us, trust us, he is different. Not to go armchair screenwriter again, but I would have preferred if the writers kept the Letters of Transit Walternate Walter for a few episodes, so the audience could both despair at how different and cruel Walter is with all his faculties, as well as recognize how capable and valuable he is to the team while operating at 100% capacity. Then when he gets scrambled, put him back to normal, or at least as normal as Walter can be, and we'll feel both the loss of a valuable asset, but the relief of having our beloved crackpot back. I understand the writer's reluctance to depict Walter acting out of character for even a single episode, though, given the backlash not our Olivia and not our Walter got last year. Fans want the characters they know and love, and even Walter gets his memories of the original timeline restored by a friendly observer at the end of the season, by the way. But you know what? It's the last season anyways. Sometimes you've just got to commit to doing something bold, take the viewership hit, and trust that you'll be vindicated by a slip-maker retrospective 10 years later.
We're not putting him in a coma.
Then we put an electromagnetic probe into the base of his skull and prime full of serotonin, neurontin, and LSD.
The one character who gets the opportunity to stretch his legs and act radically out of character, much to my delight, is Peter. Anna Torv got to play Olivia, Fauxlivia, and Bellivia. John Noble's got Walter and Walternate in the present and in 1985, and every other cast member has themselves and their double in this timeline and in the original Peter timeline, plus a potential bonus character if they happen to get swapped out by a shapeshifter. But Joshua Jackson has always just played the one Peter, so it's fun to see him finally get the chance to shake it up in the show's final year. Following the death of his daughter at the hands of the observers, an enraged Peter decides to turn their own tech against them, implanting himself with the Baldy's base kit. His humanity may be slowly slipping away, but with these newfound powers, he's able to play observer chess with Windmark and his lieutenants, engineering assassinations by making minor alterations to their daily routines in a manner that would make the ballpoint pen murderer from Season 3's The Plateau proud, even if Windmark proves he can do the same thing right back.
I knew you'd know that.
Oh, I know that. And I knew you'd know I'd know you knew.
But I didn't. I only knew that you'd know that I knew. Did you know that?
My only complaint with all the Observer Peter fun is, again, I don't think they got all the mileage they could out of this one. There's basically one episode where he's starting to utilize the abilities, but hiding it from the team. Then the next episode, he's full-on Observer Peter, and they talk him into reverting to normal before the process becomes irreversible. He's so busy doing battle with Windmark for most of that time that there aren't enough hours in the arc to explore the obvious topic of him really being his father's son, crossing moral and technological boundaries in the wake of the loss of a child. All in all, a fun idea, but I wish they'd taken more time with it. Also, I wish Peter lost his hair like the rest of the observers, but I'm sure Joshua Jackson is glad that he didn't.
You can't do this. This is dangerous.
Those are the big character arcs this season. A couple other emotional beats get touched on, but again, are kind of breezed through. There's intended to be some hurt feelings among the group in the wake of the invasion. Walter and Olivia dedicated their lives to fighting the observers, while Peter ran off to look for their missing daughter Etta instead of helping the cause. The writers aren't terribly interested in the idea. We're all fighting the good fight now, so water under the bridge. After Etta's death, Olivia or Peter do the big "we have to defeat the observers for Etta" triumphant speech, like once an episode. Maybe I'm just some kind of weirdo, but those rousing speeches and Etta's sacrifice never got my blood pumping to see the Baldys get theirs in the same way the show's more creative dystopian world building did. Ideas like how food variety has gone sparse, red vines are a thing of the past, and sustenance comes in the form of pre-packaged tubes of boiled egg whites, or the idea that you'd just be having a normal day and some observer would walk up to you and start asking asinine questions about what you were thinking about. Those are the moments that make me think, okay, this government needs to be overthrown at all costs.
What is baseball?
Excuse me?
You're thinking of the Red Sox. What is baseball?
It's like when I watched The Hunger Games for the first time. Oh no, the ruling government forces the children of their occupied territories to fight to the death in gladiator matches. You gotta keep the people in line somehow. Wait, what? That's their fashion sense? Oh my god, kill them all, right now. The final and most glaring character opportunity left on the table is, of course, Astrid. She finally got an enjoyable day in the limelight episode playing off her autistic Red Universe double in last season's Making Angels, but has otherwise been largely relegated to the role of Walt's lab assistant / straight man. In this dystopian future, you wouldn't think there'd be much need for a lab assistant, so how about sending Astrid along as the field agent she literally is to help the chemical warfare campaign. Oh no, see, the tapes describing the plan are stuck in amber, which means somebody needs to stay here and mine them out of the amber all day long and never do anything else or go on any adventures. I mean, what? Did the show's producers and Jasika Nicole just not get along or something? Oh, apparently they did not. I complained about the endgame of the Fringe team's plan being unknown, but honestly, maybe that's on me, because, of course, at the end of the day, they're doing another time travel plot. With the aid of one last acid trip, Walter and friends locate a child observer named Michael, who is capable of tremendous emotion, as well as the usual observer abilities. And the plan crystallizes. All this junk they've been collecting is to jury-rig an observer time portal. If they can send Michael forward in time to the invention of the observers, the future scientists who created observer tech will realize they can make nice, emotional observers instead of nasty, lizard-brained ones, purging observers from the timeline in the process and erasing the invasion of 2015 from history. Michael gets nabbed by Windmark and taken to Liberty Island, but realizing the other side was never invaded by observers, Olivia crosses over, casually strolls up to where Michael is being held, crosses back, and frees him. That's actually brilliant. Now you're thinking with portals.
You stop checking out my young ass.
Walter reveals someone is going to have to tag along with Michael to the future to explain the situation. He offers to sacrifice himself, but observer friend and Michael's DNA genetic clone pseudo-father, September, offers to chaperone instead. Kind of the writer's way to eat their cake and still have it. We can do the tearful goodbye with Walter if the characters know about his sacrifice in advance, and kill September at the last minute, so we can still do the surprise sacrifice had Walter kept that part of the plan a secret. The gang raids Observer headquarters by dumping every Fringe biohazard they've come across over the first 3 seasons into the air vents. And I gotta admit, hot off a fresh rewatch of all 100 episodes, that scene was pure fan service kino.
You don't know how lucky you are this room has no ventilation. Trust me.
They hijack the time portal, September bites it, Olivia pastes Windmark with a car, and Walter takes Michael to the future. Back in 2015, the Observer invasion never occurred. Etta is alive again, but as a consequence, Walter Bishop simply disappeared that day. Though he did leave one final parting note behind for Peter. A white tulip. So that's Fringe. Season 5 certainly delivers on its promise of the Fringe team going from investigators to terrorists as they attempt to overthrow a nightmare dystopian future government, even if the team's OPSEC is occasionally appalling. It certainly delivered on the finale as well. You may feel a bit like Gene the cow with the way they milk your emotions over Walter's fate, but all in all, it was an equally thrilling and sentimental wrap-up. Appropriate, given Fringe was always a show that was just as much about flesh-melting viruses as it was about traversing universes through the power of love. Sometimes it may have been a little sappy, sometimes it may have pushed the willingness of even the most willing suspension of disbelief, but when I look back on the 2 universes, 3 timelines, and countless confections requested at crime scenes, what I remember most is how frequently Fringe was the best of both worlds.
I do hope Agent Dunham meant to do that.
Who can take a sunrise?
Who can take a sunrise?
Sprinkle it with dew.
Sprinkle it with dew.
Cover it with chocolate and a miracle or two. The Candyman.
The Candyman can, 'cause he mixes it with love and makes the world taste good.
I only bring it up because the project was based